Welcome to Under the Microscope. I am your host, Jenny Germano. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Today's topic is running a smarter cannabis business. And before I dive in, I'm just going to share a little bit about my background. I got my start working in the Colorado cannabis industry in 2009, running and operating vertically integrated cannabis operations. And in 2015, I founded my company, 𝗖𝗍 Consulting, and I help operators navigate the regulatory landscape across the U.S. market. And I would like everyone to give a warm welcome to my next guest, Gail Rand. And Gail is a CPA, and she is the founder of Grand Consulting. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. I always love an excuse to talk to you, Jenny.
This is amazing. I'm so happy to have you on as a guest. And why don't you go ahead and share with our listeners about your background and when you got involved in the cannabis industry?
So I started my journey with cannabis through advocacy. I have a son who's now 17 who has epilepsy and autism and ADHD and other complications. And he was having really bad seizures that were not being solved at all with pharmaceuticals. And I had a friend in Colorado whose son went seizure-free on medical cannabis. So I got involved from an advocacy perspective to try to pass the Maryland medical cannabis bill and then joined the industry. I launched the first grow here in Maryland where I live and got that into operations and got it to profitability, and then went out on my own with Grand Consulting. I do CFO advisory work, which means I do fractional CFO work as well as special projects. My husband joined my firm a year and a half ago after 20 years with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So I'm now scaling my company from 1 to 2, and we have a lot of fun. Yeah, it's been great.
How is it working with your husband? Are you the boss?
Depends who you ask. So I think of myself as the CEO and founder, and he's more of like the managing partner, which kind of means we're in two different silos. I would love to be the boss, but it's not exactly working out that way. So we both have different clients and we work together on some clients. And honestly, we're figuring it out as we go. So he's a phenomenal resource. It's been really fun just having somebody else to bounce ideas off of. I think poor guy did not get one day off. He took a deferred retirement package as part of the DOGE process and started working for me immediately. And one of our clients had an IRS audit, actually. I was like, well, I have a forensic accountant on my team, so here you go. And it was great. It came back really clean, and I'm very proud of the work that we did leading up to the audit and then the audit itself too, so which was huge.
I mean, it sounds like he's a great asset. He has a skill set from his previous career, bringing it over to cannabis. That's pretty amazing.
I wasn't really planning on bringing on anybody, but his resume was like, I can't say no to this, right? And it works out very well. His 20 years of experience in the public side. And before that, he was in high tech. So he was a public company controller. He took a company public. So our plan all along was for him to join the firm when we thought people were going to take their companies public, because he's just got such great experience on that. And then it happened earlier than what we planned. But now, who knows, with everything with rescheduling, there might actually be an opportunity coming down the pike to go public.
I think so. I see a lot of change in our future. For sure.
And it's a lot of change in our past too, right? We've been in a constant state of change, which I'm never bored. I love this space.
No, it's been amazing. And what year did we meet? Was it like 2016? Like 2015?
It was February of 2015. So can I tell that story?
Yeah, go for it.
So I was a mom advocate and I just wanted my son to have access. I wasn't really planning on joining the industry, but my husband had a friend who was coming to DC to lobby with Women Grow's first national event, which was a lobby days on Capitol Hill. And I had just changed all these minds in Maryland. So I was like, I'm going to go change all the minds on the federal government. So naive. And I met part of Team 7. We still talk about this. And it was Maureen McNamara. Jenny was part of Team 7, Hillary Peckham, who was then Attain. And it was a day that totally changed my life because I realized that these women were brilliant and entrepreneurial, hilarious. We had so much fun and really passionate about this industry. And it was a little bit of a different perspective for me about the type of people who were in the cannabis industry. You guys were not the stereotypes that you hear all the time. And I loved that. And I just thought it was such a fun brew. And I remember thinking, I need to be part of this. And that was the day that I decided to join the industry, move on from just advocate to being part of my career. And I'm so grateful that I did that. It's been fun ever since.
Yeah, that was incredible for me because I think that was the first time I'd ever done anything like that, where I'd done local lobbying in the state of Colorado at a local level. I mean, that was the first time going to DC. It was such a whirlwind for me. And yeah, Team 7, it's so amazing. We're all still here. Some of us, I think, right? All of us.
A disproportionate number of us are still here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think and a couple of us have had successful exits too, which is also very unusual. I literally leveraged every single member of that team when launching Forward Grow, the first license. So, I mean, I didn't know very much about compliance. So you were critical in setting us up for success, including your kind but meaningful and substantive quarterly reviews. Our company came out to Maryland for us. Hillary helped me. We were trying to figure out what soyless media, so she put me in touch with her sister. Maureen helped me with getting some speaking opportunities and getting prepared. I actually got to speak in the halls of Congress a couple years later. She helped me with that and still helps me every day. Else helped me with Metric. Two people on the team helped me with Metric, and I don't know that they're still involved anymore.
I think it might have been Stephanie
Hopper and 𝗘𝗃 with Metric.
Yeah.
Because when you're the first licensee, nobody knew Metric in all of Maryland, right? To be able to have that network across the country was absolutely critical. It was very helpful.
Yeah, I know for me, it was an incredible experience. I love the Maryland market. I think it's such a great market, even to this day. We're going to tackle financial mistakes that operators make. And I'm sure you've seen kind of a wide variety on a spectrum over the years. So what's kind of like the biggest, I guess, financial mistake that you consistently see that cannabis operators are making?
I would pick two. One is people don't paper their agreements. And that is especially true with family and friends, that they assume everything's going to go well and very seldom does it when money is involved. So documenting your agreements, getting them actually signed and keeping track of them, I think is absolutely critical. And then the second item is really not understanding your costs. I would say there's been an evolution the past couple of years, but a couple of years ago, some of the MSOs didn't really truly have a handle of their costs. And part of that isn't, I'm not judging anybody, or it's not anybody's fault, because sometimes the systems are a little bit limited in the cannabis space and it's very expensive to do an ERP system. And cannabis is complicated, right? When you're talking about flower, for example, and then it starts with this weight and it ends with this weight dried versus, so managing the costs and tracking that is very complicated. But it is so important to understand your costs so that you can make decisions using actual data. A lot of times, I think people sometimes would make more money if they just stop selling certain SKUs because they're losing money every time they sell the SKU, but they don't know that.
Another piece too, and I hear this a lot, I'm sure maybe you do too, when operators tell you, well, we're making sales, but we never seem to have cash, or they're struggling with their cash flow issues. I mean, this is really a big problem for a lot of people.
A big part of it is taxes, right? Especially in a 280E environment. If your effective tax rate is 70 or 80% for dispensaries, I mean, you could be making a ton of revenue and just having enough money to cover your SG&A costs, your operating costs is very difficult. I think also sometimes, like what I said, just to give an example, you're selling products and you're losing money on it. So that sort of, your gross margin may be positive, but for certain products, your gross margin could be higher and it needs to be. To be honest, accounting and attorney fees are a lot in cannabis. I think it's hard to find good people. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about expensive accounting fees, but it's real and I want to be upfront about that.
It's true.
And I think also it's important to address inventory. A lot of times, a lot of money is stuck in inventory if you're not turning over your inventory as quickly as you can be. I like to be able to convert inventory into cash, and moving that quickly is critical to your business on both the wholesale side and the retail side.
That's a good piece about the inventory. Whether you're a cultivation facility and you have like cured, trimmed, wholesale just sitting there and not moving, or you're a manufacturer and you have products sitting there, or you're the dispensary and you have SKUs sitting there not moving. What kind of financial report should every owner actually be looking at every week?
So cash forecasts, I think whether business is tough or whether business is good, cash forecast is absolutely critical. I like to see a 13-week cash forecast because I think that's short-term enough that you can get a really good glance as to what's happening around the corner. But I also really like to see a longer term cash forecast. So especially if you're in a situation where you have debt, it's going to be very critical. And honestly, it's hard to predict sometimes. You definitely need to put in some cushion for the unknown because the only thing you know is that there's going to be some unknowns, right? Very seldom do I look at a cash forecast, where we end up with more cash than what's forecasted. I tend to be more conservative when it comes to cash forecasts because you just can't think of everything, right? So like your insurance, for example, you sometimes have to prepay if you're not financing it. And you know that it's going to come due every April, but as you're doing your cash forecast for those 13 weeks, you need to factor that in.
That's good stuff. Well, I'm going to keep talking about cash flow because I think it is an important topic. What are some warning signs that a company is headed towards kind of some financial issues or trouble before they even realize it regarding cash flow?
So I would say tracking basket size on the retail front is very helpful. If anybody is untouched by this, please reach out to me. I'm very curious. But the price pressure that we see in cannabis is real and it's affecting everybody. To your point about the Maryland market, I would say Maryland market is a little bit insulated from that compared to like what we've seen in Oregon and Washington and Colorado. But I think that's just a matter of time, to be honest. We'll see how that plays out. But I think when you start to see your basket size go down and your number of units is still the same or your customers are still the same, I think to me, that's a canary in the coal mine of the price pressure and monitoring that. I think that is something that really should be tracked. And honestly, with the point of sale systems, they actually usually are pretty easy to track, but you just have to look at the data. The other, and I'm sorry if this is obvious, but it absolutely needs to be addressed, is if you're starting to see your accounts receivable balance going up on the wholesale side. So this doesn't affect retail because everything's usually cash or credit card, but usually it starts really slowly and there's one customer that's delaying payments, right? But then all of a sudden there's two and then there's three and then it keeps building. And again, I think we've seen that in lots of states and it's something that's super important to get ahead of too, because it is a squeaky wheel situation. And if you can stop selling to people who aren't paying you, then again, that inventory is then going somewhere else and turning into cash instead of going to somewhere that you're not going to see that cash.
From a CPA perspective, why do you think there's this big struggle with people paying? I feel like there's a bunch of different reasons. I mean, if we take away people who are not good people and just not paying intentionally, what about the people who are just struggling to pay and they're having some issues?
I mean, look, honestly, I think cannabis is hard, right? Even though you're getting the cash back right away on the retail side. I guess it depends. If you're a wholesaler selling to retail, they're getting the cash right away, but the margins are tight now with the price pressure. So they're using that cash to pay for more inventory as well as some of their operating expenses. It's not a business anymore like it used to be when we started and when I started in 2015 and when you launched your business where the margins were enough that there was enough cash to pay for to go around. It's a tough business, especially depending on the tax situation. A lot of people are amending their taxes to be able to say that 280E does not apply. But the IRS, again, is auditing quite a few companies right now. I'm hearing a pretty significant uptick in IRS audits. I've even
retail side or every license type?
Every license type.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
Yeah. I've heard that the IRS has been asked post sort of the executive order in December where they wanted to do the rescheduling, where Trump directed the legislature and to do the rescheduling, or the administrators, I should say. The IRS has been aggressively going after cannabis companies, is my understanding. And I don't have a ton of active clients, and I have one going through an IRS audit. So it's a pretty good percentage of my clients that are going through it, really, too.
I just always thought it was more on the dispensary side. I kind of knew they were already getting audited for a long time now. I didn't realize they were actually auditing cultivators and manufacturers.
Yes, they are. Yeah, for sure. And I think it has to do with 280 possibly going away. Then all of a sudden they need to get the revenue where all they can. Who knows why they're doing what they're doing. But yeah. And I guess the other thing, just another warning sign is if you're needing to borrow money to fund your operations, I think that would be a pretty significant red flag. Again, a lot of times people think it's a temporary thing. Maybe it's a seasonal issue or just to cover this one debt payment or whatever. But that is something to really be aware of as a red flag.
That's a good one. What are some simple ways that operators can improve their cash flow without having to increase sales?
Nothing in this space is super simple. So I'm going to give a shot at that question, but everything's hard. I know. I do think that's worth addressing though, right? Because I can sit here from my little office and tell you all the things that I think we should do. But in the context of how you run your business and what you do on a day-to-day basis, I do have a huge appreciation for how hard it is, right? I mean, I think one of the benefits of being on the operation side to start is that I get how hard it is to run a cannabis company. And I think that's an important perspective. But there are things you can do for sure. We talked a little bit about inventory turning into cash, and I think that is important. I think having an inventory plan and a lot of inventory discipline. If you're seeing your inventory grow as your sales are going down, pump the brakes on some of your purchases and look at the products and see how you can move the products more, right? What products are moving more? So if you look at an inventory turnover by product group, then you'll have a lot more insight about what's going on. We're recently, for example, I would say probably the past 2 years, we're seeing a big uptick in infused pre-rolls, right? So your inventory and your POS system tells that story if you're looking for it. And to get ahead of it and make sure you have enough infused pre-rolls that you can move quickly, it could be very compelling for your cash flow. And ultimately, you're not spending any additional money to get that cash flow. You're just moving the inventory that you have. The other thing you can do to increase sales and manage cash flow is you can talk to your vendors about payments, right? Payment terms. They may or may not give it to you, but if you don't ask, you're definitely not going to get extended payment terms. And a lot of times, look, this industry is small sometimes. So you can have true partners, especially if you can show them that you're going to move product more frequently. They might be willing to give you longer terms, and that'll help you delay the payment.
And paying your bills on time also helps with payment terms.
For sure.
Just having a good track record.
Yeah. And being transparent and communicative. If you are having a bump in the road, I wouldn't air your dirty laundry necessarily to your vendors, but sometimes they just want to know what's going on. And if you reach out to them in advance of them reaching out to you and asking for some flexibility in the short term for payment terms, and then, yes, paying them on time, I think it could be very helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's true, the communication piece. I think a lot of frustration is people get ghosted or no one's communicating. A lot of times it's just a manager and they feel like they have no control and the owner's not giving them money to pay the vendors. And just from an employee's perspective, I mean, they're just as stressed out because they want to pay the bill and they have no control over the money situation and their hands are tied. And I think they get scared to communicate, even though it's uncomfortable. At least just telling people what's going on. And like you said, you don't have to go down the rabbit hole and tell them every dirty detail about all the crazy stuff going on in your business. And you can have a professional conversation, but it just goes a long way.
100%. And in a situation where the ownership doesn't empower the employees that have the information to move quickly, that is really challenging, quite frankly, for everyone, right?
Yeah.
I just read a really interesting book called No Rules about the Netflix story and how Netflix has been able to pivot and evolve so quickly and just totally revamp their company so many times, right? From the DVD to streaming to now content provider. And a lot of it had to do with the constraints that they had, but in context and the direction that they gave their employees. Their employees have a ton of freedom, be able to move quickly and innovate. So
yeah. And look at Netflix. I mean, they could have ended up like Blockbuster. I think there's only one left in the whole entire country. Yeah, I remember getting your DVDs in the mail. It sounds so foreign.
Okay. So my husband makes fun of me because he says that I was the last member of the DVD club. I literally stopped it maybe 3 years ago because I love documentaries. Hilarious. So I still would get the DVDs. I probably even still wouldn't get them if I had a DVD player because I love to watch documentaries and they're harder to find on streaming. But I've moved on. I've evolved and I've pivoted myself, right? So I should practice what I preach.
Oh my gosh. So the next area we're going to hit is profitability. And what are the biggest hidden costs cannabis operators kind of are overlooking right now?
A lot of times, I'm going to go back to taxes for a little bit. I'm a CPA, but I don't do taxes, but it's such a critical part of business that it ends up being part of my story. So I always recommend getting tax advice, but I think people who've done tax amendments right now are assuming that 280E does not apply and they're acting accordingly. And I don't necessarily suggest that. I'm very open to the amendments and that structure. But if the IRS comes back and audits you and wants to question what you have, you should still structure your P&L and your chart of accounts as if you have 280E in case we start losing some of those cases and they go back in time. So if there's some things that you could deduct in a 280E environment, you should keep them as deducted in this amendment environment, if that makes sense. So I think that's an area that I think is being overlooked right now because people are like, oh, I have this letter from my attorney that the 280E doesn't apply, so it doesn't apply. And also changing it, I think also could be impactful because IRS might say, if you just were doing this deduction because of tax reasons, then it never really was cost of goods sold. And we're going to go back to the beginning of time and adjust. And there's a risk there as well within the statute of limitations. So operational efficiencies is another area. I lost my AirPods, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
That I think is very important. With cannabis, again, because it's so hard and there's so much compliance-focused stuff that you have to do that you don't have to do in unregulated businesses, I think people aren't always operating their business and focusing on sort of efficiencies. I come from a lean process improvement background. That's what I did before cannabis in the finance function. I attended some conferences on the manufacturing side. And it was extraordinary what you can do if you're managing your time and your hours. Back in the day, people used to talk about trimmers and making sure they were efficient. But very seldom do they talk about anything else, right? Transplanting and weighing and automation. There's a lot of opportunities. And I think this is one of the most critical things. I think this is going to be the thing that is going to have the cream rise to the top as this industry continues to evolve in the rescheduling environment. Whoever is able to have true operational efficiency is going to be a huge success.
I know you were talking about lean as it relates to financial, but also kind of like lean manufacturing practices. And what do they call that?
Six Sigma, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. I don't know that we're going to get to 6 Sigma, but if we could just get 2 or 3 Sigma,
we'll
I
take
think
2 or
we'll take
3.
it.
2 or 3.
Yes.
We're not going to be black belts in it yet. There's always people offering the black belt in it, but like we're not black belts, but at least we can get past the white belt phase of it.
Right, because when we started in 2015, it was like a land race, right? People were just going and getting whatever licenses they could without really a lot of thoughtfulness. I would say an exception to that is GTI. I think we have seen GTI be very deliberate about where they got their licenses, and therefore we haven't seen them sell off a bunch of licenses, and we actually have seen them be profitable. But with that exception, a lot of companies were just trying to grow without being thoughtful. And then they had to integrate all these companies, and there's all these founders, and there's so many dynamics there. And now I think we're at a point right now where people are, especially people who are going on the New York Stock Exchange or public companies in general, they're going to have to be incredibly efficient on the operational front. And then once they're operationally efficient, some of the smaller players are going to be competing against people who are going to have much better margins, much better efficiency. So as much as you can get efficient with your time and your labor and your costs, it's going to be critical.
That's 100% true. That's the future of owning and operating one of these cannabis operations is efficiency, compliance, efficiency, managing your finances appropriately.
Yep.
Cannabis is going mainstream, which is so weird to say.
So weird.
It's so weird because a lot of people would say, oh, it already is mainstream. Well, sure, we commercialized it in silos, but I'm talking the future is going to be interstate commerce, exporting, importing into different countries and vice versa, coming into here. What's all that going to look like? I just think the future of cannabis definitely is going to look different than what we're talking about here in 2026, for sure.
I couldn't agree more, although I'm also not going to stick my neck out too far to tell you what I think it is going to look like, because I just don't know. But to your point, if there's interstate commerce and you have a grow here in Maryland, then the cost efficiencies and the operational efficiencies of that growth needs to be able to compete with a huge, large outdoor grow in California. And they can grow for much cheaper than we can indoor or even in a greenhouse.
Or desired because people want flower from the Emerald Triangle. It will be a very desired, if they could, export across the U.S. market, people are going to want that product from California because they have the high quality bud that they grow outdoors.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch, especially be interesting to watch how much internationally they know about the Emerald Triangle. Sometimes not sure how that's going to play out. Is it going to be the champagne kind of perspective? I think there is a risk of sometimes in the industry, I feel like we're in an echo chamber where you know the Emerald Triangle, I know the Emerald Triangle, but do people in Germany know enough about the Emerald Triangle? It's enough in pop culture, I think, to talk about California weed, right? The movies and TV shows. play it up quite a bit.
Netflix shows, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there is definitely a desire for that. But if somebody else can grow it cheaper, are they going to? We've been talking about brands in cannabis since I met you in 2015, right? And I just, in the past probably 3 to 6 months, have 2 brand clients. Before that, I haven't really seen, that come to fruition quite as much. I think that's changing. And I do think finally, after 13 years of being in this space, we're going to actually see brands develop, and especially with interstate commerce. But I think it's been a lot slower than anybody expected. So it'll be fun to watch.
No, I'm actually excited. And I want to kind of pedal back to the piece you mentioned, champagne. And this is just a great example. Champagne is produced in Champagne, France.
In the Champagne region. Yes, that's right.
Champagne region of France. Okay. So
otherwise, it's just a bubbly, sparkly wine. Yeah.
I didn't know that. And I learned that when I went to Italy and I started trying all these different wines. And they're like, oh no, like this cheese is this region. If anyone else is making this cheese anywhere else, they're knocking it off and it's not the real thing. And then they brought up the example of champagne. And I think that's going to be the same thing for flower when, like there's going to be different regions. Obviously when we get into the green belt, like Southern Oregon, the Emerald Triangle in California, I think people will learn about it, just like I learned about champagne, which I had no idea that Prosecco or champagne were all these different regions. I just thought, give me the bottle of Prosecco. Like, I don't know where this comes from, but it looks really good. And I think just like I was educated on wine or champagne, I think people from other countries will learn about that in the United States market.
I hope so. And I think it'll be so interesting to watch. I don't think it's a slam dunk, though, in my mind. And I'll tell you why. Like, when you think about fruits and vegetables, I can tell you I know Hass avocado and I know Chiquita banana. And I think there's a little clementine that I used to know. I forgot what it's called. Cuties, the cuties, right?
Yeah, cuties are everywhere.
Until recently, Chiquita banana has been around for a long time, but those are relatively new. Cuties is the first addition to that branding of fruits and vegetables that I've seen. I don't know if you get cotton candy grapes, for example. I'm starting to see it now. They're delicious. If you can get cotton candy grapes, you should 100% get them. But
I wish we got Jersey tomatoes in Colorado.
Really?
Jersey tomatoes, for all those on the East Coast, they're like the size of your head. They're the most amazing tomatoes ever.
Oh,
Jersey
never
tomatoes.
had it.
The corn and the tomatoes out here, I'm like, compared
see,
to
for me,
the East Coast or the Midwest.
Oh, our corn is the best. Yeah, our corn is the best. But even the corn, there's no brand of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see how that works, whether it becomes on a regional basis or whether certain companies will actually be able to brand their specific products. It'll be very interesting to see how it succeeds.
No, we're talking about tomatoes and corn. But it's good to give different examples that are already happening out in the world and apply cannabis to it, because it could end up unfolding that way for cannabis. And I always try to connect those dots. Where do you typically see the most wasted money? Or, leaving money on the table?
At the fear of beating a dead horse, I do think it's important. I'm going to talk about inventory again. I mean, having the right mix for your customers, and your customers may be different than the inventory down the street because of your marketing, your branded, et cetera. On the grow side, your yield of your inventory, making sure you're keeping that up and growing as much as you can per square foot. Monitoring expiring inventory, I think, is another thing to make sure you're not having to destroy product. I think also, and this is really hard for me to say, but another thing other than inventory to look at is your team. A lot of times cannabis companies are like a family, and I love that about the space. But if you're not able to succeed and run a successful company, making sure that you're as lean as you can be on the team front. And the other side of that coin is automation. It's interesting. Yeah. We're seeing a ton of automation in Maryland, much more sophisticated wholesale facilities here than I see usually anywhere else. And that's possibly because we started with 15 grows, for example. So people were able to get investment and purchase equipment that allows them to automate. But if you are automating, you spend a lot of money on equipment and your team is also still doing a lot, then I think that could be harmful. I would say technology is another area. There's a lot of times that there's some wasted money in underutilizing technology or relying too much on a system like Metric, which is not an operational system. It is a compliance system. It is a diversion tool. It is not, in my opinion, a system that allows you to get a lot of information to run your business. And you've probably seen this too, especially on the compliance front, is the packaging. Packaging can be very expensive. Some of it is gorgeous and unique, but if it's takes the product from profitability to not profitable, then it doesn't really matter how much you sell. And you can often packaging people and get better pricing. A lot of times you need to plan ahead because there is lead time, but I think packaging is another area that I see some wasted money sometimes.
Yeah, and it's also, are you with a packaging company that's getting affected by tariffs versus another packaging company that's made in the USA and they're not getting hit with tariffs and they're actually getting discounts because it's made in the USA, the manufacturing. And I like the software piece. It's so true. What I find is people, either they don't have any software to help them navigate data or information in their business, or they have too much in their tech stack and they have too much of the same softwares that can do multiple things. And there's so much overlap that they're paying $1,000 for this one and $500 for this one and $700 a month for this one. And instead of trying to do the research to find one that can try to do it all, or at least narrow it down to two or something. But I find that sometimes people's tech stacks are overwhelmingly huge.
Can I double click on that a little bit? I also see huge tech stacks and nobody uses the information from the technology
the
tools.
data.
Yeah,
they're not using the data.
And I think that's even easier now than it ever has been to take data from a system and analyze it, right? Just run it through Claude or run it through ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you have. Or even better yet, is the AI tool integrated into the system. And just assume your competitors are getting the data and analyzing it. And they know who their customers are. They know what they're buying. They know when they're buying it. They know why they're buying it. And if you don't know that information, it could be harmful.
No, I agree. And the staff piece too, I think you were spot on. And I think a lot of times people hold on to staff knowing they need to be leaner and they just, the family piece. And so it can be challenging. A lot of times people, they build these incredible teams where it's like, well, we're all one big family. We work so well together. And so that can be a challenge on how do you go lean with your staff too.
Yep. I totally agree with that.
It seemed like in 2022 up to 2024, I watched a lot of companies really begin to streamline how they have their staff and their operations, where instead of having, 5 compliance officers, I remember these people would have these huge compliance teams, and you're not really seeing that anymore. Maybe the MSOs do, but even I've seen the MSOs kind of shrink down their compliance teams as well. And where maybe they turn it over to the department with all the attorneys or general counsels now taking on more compliance, and where they let go of the safety manager, or they didn't have a full-time metric person and then the manager took over. So I'm seeing all these different ways. And it's just something I've been watching because I've had a lot of employees reach out to me saying, hey, I was the compliance person for 5 years and they're not using a compliance person anymore. They got rid of the role or it got absorbed by this management position. And so I've been seeing it. Yeah, or they outsource it or third party. But I've been seeing that steadily happen since like 2022.
Yeah, when I started Forward Grow, my business partners came from traditional ag. So they provided living goods, all the plants and flowers, et cetera, to Home Depot in the Mid-Atlantic region. So if you bought a plant, it was my business partners grew it. But they came from traditional ag. I always kept telling them, we are a compliance company that happens to sell cannabis, because it was such a leap from where they started. And they were like a little skeptical. So I brought Gina on as a consultant because I was like, let's just get one consultant. And 3 days in with us having plants, when they realized how much work it was just to tag the plants, we hired 3 more people. We went from 0 with an outsourced independent consultant to 4, I think, within our first 2 weeks of operations.
And she was the full-time compliance person there.
Yes. I
actually have old pictures of Gina and I in full biosuits in the grow. And I don't know, you probably don't know this, but I still laugh about it. I still have pictures that I must have stepped away with Gina at one point, and I didn't even find out till I got home. But one of the staff members took my phone and took all these selfies of him.
To be funny or to be weird?
To be funny.
Oh, okay.
I got back home and there were like all these selfies. I can't remember who it was. I'll have to send it to you. But I was like,
please do.
I was laughing so hard.
Yeah. Awesome. If I had to guess, it was probably Danny, but I don't know.
It might have been, but
yeah, we had fun back in the day. It was an adventure. Look, when you start your company and you're the only grow in a state for 3 months, it was like a pretty good environment, right? Like, I feel very fortunate that was my entree into cannabis. If I had to do it over again, I probably would be second, not first, because it was so hard to get all the regulatory considerations ready to go when nobody else knew anything about anything. We were constantly pivoting. But it was an adventure for sure. I'm glad that you were part of it.
Oh, it was a beautiful greenhouse, honestly. It's still up there in my top favorites.
I bet you tell that to all your guests.
No, that's not true. That's not true. So if you walked into, I guess, a grow manufacturing facility or a dispensary, what financial metrics would you want to see from these guys immediately?
Gross margin. And gross margin by SKU or by product line. I do a quarterly review of the public company gross margins, and we look at the top 15 gross margins, and it's been fascinating lately. And even though I know an individual single state operator or a smaller company that may just have a grow or process or dispense may not be in the same boat as these larger MSOs and these larger public companies, it's a great baseline to see how things are evolving. So I've been doing it for 5 years, and I've been seeing the gross margin going down over time, which is no surprise to anybody because of the price pressure. But quantifying it and seeing it was a little bit still really. And now I'm getting some more insight into gross margin with some of the companies going public on the New York Stock Exchange. So we were able to look at what Truliev's gross margin was as a combined company and then as separate from medical. So they were the highest gross margin before, and their medical only piece is even higher than the combined with the adult use. So it's
because the reports are public.
Because they did with their deconsolidation, they showed right now they have just the pro forma for the medical side only, which is obviously driven primarily by Florida. So it makes sense that their margins are so high. But and then the other side of the coin, I was seeing Glass House, and Glass House separated their grow and process as being medical, and then their dispense can maybe be medical or adult use. So that's how they separated it. And you look at their margins, and it's significantly lower their medical because it's like large scale grow and wholesale. So it's fascinating. So yes, I think it's very important. Yeah, it's been really fun to watch. I can't wait for the next company to go on New York Stock Exchange. Maybe 𝗘𝗃, so I can see how they split adult use and medical, and then also look at the margins by that split. So
smart to be looking at all that. Well, I kind of want to ask about scaling. Like, at what point should an operator bring on a fractional CFO instead of relying on a bookkeeper? There's nothing wrong with bookkeepers. I have friends that are bookkeepers.
I would say not only is there nothing wrong, bookkeepers are absolutely critical because people like me are relying on them. And it's so hard to find a good bookkeeper. So if you have a good bookkeeper, keep them and treat them well. I get brought in a lot when there's a capital raise. I don't do the capital raise itself, but I definitely help companies get ready for that. Same thing with an M&A transaction. Making sure your back office is clean and ready to go can pay for itself in spades. So those are 2 easy times to bring in a fractional CFO. If you think you're going to be in a period of rapid growth, absolutely a CFO can help you get ready for that. We love those projects because there's so much low-hanging fruit that you can have a huge impact to make a difference. The other side of the coin is if you're really struggling with cash flow management and you need somebody to really analyze and project your cash flow and monitor it on a regular basis, that's a project where if we can help you stay afloat by planning and managing your cash, is some of the ways we've already talked about. I think it could be useful to companies. So the easy answer to your question is if the owners are spending, or the management team are spending more time reacting than planning, then they probably need a little bit of help, right? And sometimes it's a small project to start, just understanding your costs, understanding your margins. But it can lead to other opportunities as well. So hopefully that answers your question. There's lots of reasons to bring in a cool CFO.
I agree. And I think maybe a business owner out there, they might not have realized that they could even have that option. Maybe they think, I have to hire somebody full time. But I think that there's a lot of these fractional roles out there. I do fractional as well because somebody just might say, hey, can you come help me for 3 months? Then I move on to the next thing and help somebody else for 6 months or or a year.
And I know how you work because I worked with you, and you come in and you do the process and you set up the processes and you set up the systems and the tools. And by systems, that generically, not the actual tech systems, but like
Yeah.
the systems and processes to continue to operate after you leave. Because that is not always the case with outsourced people, right? Setting up for success is critical when you have an outsourced person. And I know that you do it because I reap the benefit of you doing it, right? I mean,
Yes.
I think we brought you in every month in the beginning, and then 3 months in, and you were like, we can shift to quarterly now. So
yeah, we did. We shifted quarterly.
And I
Yeah.
felt like I graduated. I was so proud of our team that we didn't need a monthly person like telling us all the things we were doing wrong in the beginning.
It's amazing. And I do that still now. I work with people for around 6 months and then I get them on a twice a year schedule. And they eventually all graduate and I set their systems up and they'll come in and say, hey, we had a lot of turnover. Can you come look at everything? I think it's important to do, especially if you don't have anyone in your team that can set up those systems. And I know for me, when I was running operations, I was so embedded in what was going on that it was hard to have that outside, that bird's eye view. Where
Yep.
now I'm the person that comes in with the bird's eye view. I
Yeah.
see all these things maybe other people aren't seeing.
It's fun. I like that part of doing what we're doing. Like you can put on your cape in 2 seconds and be like, how about that? And what about that? And if you did that, and it can make an impact very quickly.
It's so true. Well, I want to talk about investment with things changing that maybe people are starting to prepare for this, especially with investors. What do investors immediately notice when reviewing a company's financials? Are there certain things that they're looking for? Is that something that you do as well?
I do. I love that work. I think I'm going to tell a story first, if I could. When we were going through the process at Forward Grow, we unsolicited had people coming up to us and wanting to buy our license from the very beginning, right? And that was not our intention at the very beginning, but it became part of the longer term plan. And one time we had the real conversation about a possible acquisition, and we were able to do the due diligence in 3 business days. And it's something I'm very
Wow.
proud of, not because I think we were rock stars per se. It's just that we were already looking at all the stuff that should be looking at, right? In my mind, there's one exception. I did not have employee turnover data. I still remember to this
Yeah.
day. That was the one report we had to create. And that's why it took 3 days instead of 2 days. And we should have been looking at it, to be honest. But we were, things move so quickly. Really, investors shouldn't be asking anything that you're not asking yourself, right? Like anything that they care about your business, you should also be caring about. So to some extent, the due diligence process should just be like another day in the life of a cannabis CFO in my mind. But I also appreciate that's an idealistic perspective. And sometimes people are just trying to get their bills paid, right? And they're just trying to do collections. So investors obviously are going to look at your cash. They're going to look at your P&L. They're going to want to understand your gross margin for sure. I think they're going to look at your debt structure for sure. That's probably one of the first things they're going to look at. They're going to look at the quality of your reporting. And the quality of reporting is how you put your face forward, right? So if you don't know a lot of the answers and don't have a dashboard to try to get there very quickly, I don't think you need to have everything memorized out of the cuff. But if you don't have something at the tip of your fingertips and you don't know your numbers, that's a big tell for potential investors, I think. And understanding the market. And again, like taking your financials and understanding them, you can use a CFO advisor is a great tool for that. And also AI can help you. And
Yeah.
a CFO advisor that's using AI can help you very efficiently answer those questions.
What causes them to walk away? Is it just the risk exposure is too big? Or is it a bunch of accumulation of things?
I think it's the team more often than not is what
Oh,
I see. They start
interesting.
to be uncomfortable with something that was said, or
Interesting.
they feel like there's lack of transparency. That's the number one thing that I see, to be honest, is that there's just a lack of comfort with
I would
how
have
things
thought
are
it was
being run.
financial reasons. I would never have thought that.
A lot of times, like you can get a sense of the financials early on. And then if you move to that next step of the conversation, you're often investing in the team because, especially if you're buying the equities instead of the assets, you're going to be having their past problems. So a lot of times, I would say the other thing I see a lot is the tax liability. Whether it's an uncertain tax position or whether it's actually a true liability. A lot of times companies have huge tax liabilities, and that is probably the close second thing that I see that makes people walk away. I got a couple more. Can I keep going?
Yeah, this is not my world. This is fascinating.
Oh, good. Unrealistic forecasts. And that kind of gets to the whole team conversation I just mentioned too. If you're going to show your hockey stick of your revenue and you're going to see we're having trouble right now, but it's going to double next year. I see that all the time. And I tend to be very conservative when it comes to forecasting, which sometimes people want to genuinely believe what they want to happen. And hope is not a strategy. I hear that all the time in cannabis, but I'm going to keep saying it because I think it's very important. You need to be realistic about your forecasts. When I started Grand Consulting, one of the first meetings I had, I remember it was at NJ Biz, and I was meeting with an investor, and we put together this whole package, and we had a baseline example, we had an upside example, and we had a conservative model. And we were going through all the models. And the first thing the investor said is, I'm not wasting any time on your base or your upside, because in every model I've ever seen, the conservative is more accurate than a base model. So he wouldn't even engage in looking at the upsides. And
well, good thing you came with 3.
That's right. If your baseline is really conservative and you actually are realistic, I think you have more credibility, right? I've evolved on that a little bit. And then obviously, if there's no real path to profitability, and you don't necessarily need to be profitable out of the gate, but if there's no path to profitability, there's going to be price pressure. I know we've talked about that a lot today, but it's important. If you're not reflecting some price pressure and continue to be profitable in a price pressure environment, then I think investors are going to run like the wind.
No, that's really good. I'm going to jump ahead of the current market now. I wanted to see your input. I know we're not experts in rescheduling, and we don't have a magic crystal ball. What do you think is going to happen with rescheduling? How's it going to affect mergers and acquisitions? Because the truth of what we do know is happening is the DEA is 100% going into operations and inspecting. I just talked with somebody in Mississippi, and the operators, they're getting inspected. Dispensaries, there's a portal that they've launched already for dispensaries. And so there's all these things that I'm hearing from people in different states that they're coming through. There's a lot we still don't know yet. I do understand that piece.
Yes. And it's very important to talk about what we don't know and also have some fun pontificating, right? So yeah, I agree. This is not a crystal ball conversation. This is a what if, and what if this happens? I would say that the way I word it is that rescheduling already has happened for medical, right? We're already seeing that. And what it looks like is we've seen 2 examples on the New York Stock Exchange that we said, and they're both very different perspectives on what medical looks like, right? Trulieve, again, defined medical by state. So in the states that they have full medical programs like Florida, that's medical all the way through the supply chain, from grow, process, all the way through distribution, dispense. Glassouts defined medical as grow and process, and then it's not until it touches the retail that it becomes medical or adult use. It'll be very interesting to watch that evolution. I did get an opportunity to go to the DEA hearing in Virginia a week ago, I think it was now, and talking about adult use. And to your point, as far as how some of the stigmas have been evolving, as a mom advocate whose son's life was saved by medical cannabis, it was actually a little refreshing to hear the federal government defending that cannabis is medicine. If you had told me that in 2015 when you and I met, I would have been like, yeah, we got 20 years before that's going to happen.
50.
And we're only 11 years away from that. And literally everything that I've heard, which is the transcripts aren't available yet in the DEA, but the federal government is making a pretty aggressive argument. They're not doing a ton of cross, but they've done a pretty good job making an argument that this is a medical product and it should be a Schedule III. So what I don't understand, and this is a big question for a lot of attorneys, is you might have this plant be a Schedule III status. Definitely, it's already for medical, right? Although there's going to be some lawsuits and challenges of it. But for right now, the current status quo is medical is Schedule III. And it's probably going to be retroactive, maybe to the beginning of the year, maybe further back. I'm not willing to guess on that at all, just to be clear. But adult use, I think there's a chance it might go Schedule III. I'm cautiously optimistic about that. But in order to get full legal status, I think you're going to need the DEA registration, right? So
correct.
It might be Schedule III, but it still might not be legal, if that makes sense. There's a nuance there, right? And I think that's going to impact credit cards, uplisting, going public on the big exchanges, et cetera. So I think that's going to be a huge variable that is going to be really interesting to watch to see how that evolves. What I advise is not necessarily pivoting your entire business one way or another because you don't know, but thinking about how you would pivot when the time comes and we do know is going to be critical because things are going to happen quick. Things are already happening quicker. The uplisting, I think, happened quicker than anybody guessed. And now people are strategizing on it.
Well, the fact that the federal government's going in and doing these inspections, I thought that happened pretty quick.
But my understanding with the inspections is it's more information gathering, that they're not shutting anybody down or making any problems. Have you heard something other than that?
No, these are not compliance inspections. I think
Right.
they're trying to validate people who
Yeah.
registered
Yeah.
and they're learning. And so something to pay attention to, the Mississippi Medical Cannabis Association, they are going to be putting together a report of getting information from operators in Mississippi who've had these inspections. I was just told
Mhm.
119 dispensaries have already been inspected by the DEA in Mississippi. And
How many dispensaries are there in Mississippi? I thought there were only 119, right? I don't know.
I think there's close to 100.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
more than half. That's interesting.
Yeah, in the medical
Fascinating.
market. Yeah, I'm learning a lot about it. I'm like everybody else. I'm trying to swim through this crazy
Yes.
ocean of so much misinformation and crazy amounts of information. And I'm trying to intelligently discern what's real, what's reality, and what's just,
Yeah.
I've seen people say, everything's over, the sky is falling, craziness about. I'm thinking, okay, I'm not listening to those people. Give me some people who are rooted in reality. And let's be practical here, right? And I try to take a practical approach to it. So it's got to be hard for operators to navigate that too, because I'm trying to navigate it.
Yeah, especially the smaller operators, right? The larger ones have this arsenal of attorneys and support networks. And so that's what you're competing against. And that concerns me, to be honest. The number one lesson that I've learned in the cannabis industry is you have to focus on what you can control, because there's so much you cannot control, right? And being ready to pivot, I think, is absolutely critical. We've been talking for a while now, and we haven't even talked about the hemp ban, right? What is that
Yeah.
going to mean for our industry? There's so much unknown right now that we could probably talk for another 2 hours and not address all the variables of things. But maybe we'll see. I'm hoping that we might see a little uptick in sales in November when the hemp ban happens. I don't know if that's going to be the case for sure, but there's some people who believe there's going to be a huge uptick. I'm not sure I'm one of those, but we'll see, especially on the beverage front. Is there going to be, instead of having 1 to 2% of the sales being beverages, are they going to move up to 3 or 4? I don't know. It'll be very interesting to watch. And being ready to pivot that there is going to be very important.
And how are the states going to react, right? And will it
Yep.
change anything for people who just operate? Like right now, we have a lot of people who sell hemp beverages in Colorado, but they don't sell out of state. They just sell the bars and restaurants. And they're not allowed to do Delta 8 out here, and they can do the Delta 9, and it can't be over 1.75 per serving. So what's going to happen? Is it just going to stay the same? Are they going to have to pivot? Or is it really going to be up to every state? And every state is different across the U.S. market when it comes to hemp. It seems a little messy, if you ask me. It's really,
Right.
yeah.
Because the supply chain might have to change dramatically, right? I don't know if the beverage people in Colorado are getting input material from all over the country, or is it all
Just in
sort
here.
of
They have to buy it from an approved source they have the PHE, was the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, and they have to be on the approved list, and they can't be safe harbor, which is the Delta 8. They can't have any of the synthetic cannabinoids or
interesting.
anything. That's all banned here.
And the emulsion is also happening within the state, or can you take the Colorado hemp and move it somewhere else to get emulsified?
It all has to happen here.
Oh, interesting. So it's already completely in trust state for the beverages. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see. And it'll also be interesting to see how the states and the federal government enforce the ban, if at all, right?
Yeah.
Because that's another big question. Have we just created a large gray market for hemp beverages? So,
Well, I have to say, this fall is going to be popping with all kinds of craziness going on. So in the cannabis industry. Well,
enjoy your summer while you have it.
No kidding, right? And wrapping up, are there any kind of like best practices that you want to leave listeners with? I know we covered quite a bit.
Yeah, I would say the best practices, focus on internal controls a little bit, making sure you have segregation of duties. Make sure you're managing your cash forecasts. Again, the 13-week and then longer-term cash forecast is absolutely critical. Papering your documents, understanding your metrics that you care about in your company, your KPIs, and just focusing on your labor costs, automating where necessary if you have that capital to do so. Keeping an eye on your accounts receivable, a bunch of things like I think are going to be very helpful. Those are the low-hanging fruit. There's a lot more than that, but I think those are the low-hanging fruit that are worth focusing on.
That's really helpful. And Thank you so much. This was awesome. There's all kinds of good nuggets in here. And I think the listeners are going to be very appreciative. I have a lot of small operators that listen to this podcast and small business owners. And I'm going to make sure that I have your information for people in the description box. You wanted to make sure that people say, I saw you on the podcast if they reach out to you so you know how they heard about you. So thanks again for being here.
Yeah, it's so fun to talk to you. It feels like a full circle moment since you were there the day I decided to join the industry. So it's really nice to look back and talk to you, this fun industry that we call cannabis.
I agree. I appreciate your time. And for those who like to stream the podcast, it is available on Apple and Spotify or wherever you like to listen. And if you like video podcasts, check out at Under the Microscope with Jenny, which is my YouTube channel. And thanks again, Gail. Team 7 forever from our lobbying group. Thanks again to our listeners, and I'll see you next week on the next episode.